Edgar Quero is a stud, and Luis Robert Jr. continues his return to stardom. Let's discuss their impact on a weekend series win on today's episode of Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan. I write for SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fansided Network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already, and also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Well, the White Sox either win by blowout or it seems like rain-shortened fashion. And that's how the team picked up a weekend series win. Oh, and it was also because Edgar Quero, he's a young stud player we've been hoping for, and Luis Robert Jr. continues to come out of his early season slump, and I want to discuss their impact of providing a preview of better days to come in the first segment. Then Jacob Amaya somehow keeps surviving roster shakeups. I want to discuss that along with why it was good the Sox gave up on Bobby Dalbec and Penn Murfee. And finally, it's Monday, so let's do a Minor League Monday report. And this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. All right, so Edgar Quero has been as good as advertised. And then you add in Chase Meidroth, and you start to see the promise of better days to come. Obviously, still early in the process of both of their careers, but those two have been impressive, not just in their production, but also their approach at the plate. I love both of their approaches at the plate, especially Quero, and that's why I feel good about what he's going to do in his big league career, and it's going to be great things. I'm fairly confident he is going to be an anchor player for the next 6 years. Well, and actually bonus 7 years because they brought him up after the chance to get the incentives for any draft picks. They decided to go with, club control manipulation rather than, hey, let's see if this guy can win Rookie of the Year and get us some, an additional first round pick. Not like there's anything wrong with that. I would have just rather have gone with the first round pick, potentially, because again, we don't know what club control is going to look like in the next CBA. But I feel really, really good about where Edgar Quero's career is going. And also, you got to feel good about what Luis Robert Jr. has been doing lately. And when was the last time you could say that? When was the last time you could say, man, I feel really good about what Luis Robert Jr. is doing at the plate? Obviously, it wasn't last season. And the other difference of at least why, things look at least a little bit better right now on May 5th when the White Sox have finally gotten to 10 wins, when it took them till May 9th last year, is Luis Robert Jr. is healthy. He's producing, at least starting to produce. Remember last season, we couldn't see, when he came back from that injury, we couldn't say, man, he's doing great at the plate, because he wasn't. And the first couple of weeks of the season, he was terrible at the plate. But clearly, he just doesn't like playing in cold weather. But he had the type of weekend performance, along with last Thursday, that makes you hopeful that he has rebuilt his trade value. Now you just have to hope that he continues on this path that he's on of impacting the game with his bat, with his glove, and with his speed on the base path, as he now leads the major leagues in stolen bases. And you also have to hope he stays healthy. And for a brief moment, I actually entertained, man, it would be great if they could somehow keep Quero and Robert Jr. together through the rest of the decade. I mean, I thought, man, that would just be very nice to have. But I can't go there. And I can't stay in that space for too long. If you want to, that's fine. I'm not telling you how to fan, but I'm going to give you a couple of reasons why you want to maybe more focus on, again, hey, Luis Robert Jr. is playing well because it's going to help the rebuild, because he's the last talented player they have that could fetch more impact prospects like in Edgar Quero. And, the first is Luis Robert Jr. is represented by Scott Boras. And Scott doesn't do extensions. He takes his guys to free agency. And the club control runs out by 2027. That's when it runs out. And that means, again, two ships passing in the night. To borrow an analogy from the Recap podcast host, Ryan McGuffey, who gave the same analogy with Garrett Crochet. By the time the White Sox are probably going to be competitive, if Edgar Quero keeps on this pace, if Chase Meidroth keeps on this pace, and then you add in a Kyle Teal, maybe, reclaimed Colson Montgomery, a Braden Montgomery, George Wolcott, Noah Schultz, Hagen Smith, Grant Taylor, along with Sean Burke in the rotation and Shane Smith, you're looking at maybe 2027. But again, Boras, he usually doesn't sign extensions. And while you can always say the client dictates what the agent should do, Scott Boras has an amazing way of Jedi mind tricking most of his clients to say, I'll get you even more money in free agency. And in 2027, Luis Robert Jr. will be 29. So he still technically could get him a big bag of money. But also the threat of injuries is always going to be a dark cloud over Luis Robert Jr. And with this owner that provides limited financial resources, do you want big time money tied up in LRJ? That's always going to be the risk. Right now, knock on wood, and you should always be knocking on wood and, hoping, like hope that he stays healthy. But would you want to risk having all that money tied up in him for the potential of his injuries that he can potentially have? Now, obviously, the White Sox, I think, are doing a much better job, at least on their end, handling Luis Robert Jr. physically by giving him some days at DH, some days on the bench. Maybe they might want to move him to right field. They're not asking him, they're being more conscious instead of, like, again, the previous administration that just thought, hey, Luis Robert Jr. could basically play all three outfield positions. Just let's have him run around the outfield. We're going to put Eloy in right. We're going to put Andrew Benintendi Andrew Vaughn in left. And we're just going to ask Luis Robert Jr. to run and run and run and run, when maybe he's just not meant to run that much. But there's always going to be the threat. And right now, his contract is great because you can always get out from under it just in case there is the injury. Well, you don't want to lose him for nothing. You at least still have some outs with those two club options. But if you extend them through the decade, you're talking about, first of all, likely the first ever $100 million deal and probably no escapes. And that brings me to the other reason why you just can't go there, which is sad. But the $100 million deal is probably the third reason Luis Robert Jr. is going to be traded because, let's face it, the owner isn't going to pay him. He's just not. He's paying him what he's paying him right now, that 15 to 20 million. That's where the owner is fine with. I don't see the White Sox going to a $30 million a year contract, which, if he keeps producing at this pace, he's probably going to get. I don't know how many years he's going to get, but he will get a big time salary because, again, he has shown glimpses, and in the 2023 season with that great year, that he can be an elite player, but he can also, not only that, he can win games in three fashions. He can beat you with his glove like he did to the Milwaukee Brewers on Thursday, and his bat like he did to the Milwaukee Brewers on Thursday, and then with his speed because he can get into scoring position like he did with the Houston Astros yesterday. So that's why he has value. It's just the injury issues. And his trade value is at least back in the positive. As per Fangraphs, his production converted into dollars is at least $1 million. Last week it was at, I think, minus 4.2 million. So, he went from basically you'd have to give away extra players to maybe get something back and eat a ton of his salary to maybe you're eating some salary, but you can definitely get a top 15 prospect. You obviously want it to continue to grow. You would love for it to get back to that 2023 value, which I think he was at 39 million in terms of dollars converted, so that's just the type of thing that you want to see. And he was great on Friday with a home run and 2 walks. He was bad on Saturday, had a 4 strikeout game, but I've come to accept his strikeouts so long as he's not flailing away at pitches down and away. And I think he's done a better job at laying off those pitches down and away, where he's still, where I want to be like, why are you adding additional strikes? Is he's still swinging at pitches down and in. Like, those are like his 2 kryptonites that I've always seen. Him thinking that he could get a pitch down and away. I don't know what he's trying to do there. And in some cases, it is just a pitcher, maybe throwing a sinker, maybe, something spin to get it down and in. So maybe he's seeing it differently. And you'd like to see him make that adjustment. But most of his strikeouts are coming in a variety of lately. Yes, combination of swinging down and in, probably getting fooled for strike 1 or 2. He's missing the mistake, because he's going to get at least 1 mistake per at bat. And lately he's been getting more of them, but he still sometimes is missing them because you can see he's trying to basically do as much damage as he can. And then it's that pitch down and in the lower part of the strike zone that keeps getting him because he's trying to lay off on it. Because he's trying to lay off on the lower side. So I think what he's got to make the adjustment is can he better guess or see when that pitch is coming in down and in on him to know that this is getting out of the zone. And then on the flip side, if it is looking like it's in the zone, fight it off or drive it. That's where I think he needs to make. But hey, he did at least bounce back yesterday, went 2 for 3, scored the game-winning run, and he hit the game-tying RBI. So you like to see that. But it was Edgar Quero who drove him in as he had himself a series. 4 for 7, a double, 2 runs, 2 walks, 3 RBIs. And about the only downside was he sat on Saturday. But that's part of the problem that this team is still wanting to give Andrew Vaughn at bats. Because I would have preferred Edgar Quero DHing instead of Vaughn. And Quero needs to be in the lineup as much as possible. Although I will say this, I'm fine that he got Saturday off. I mean, it can't hurt to rest his legs. The guy is a catcher, so it can't hurt to give him a day off here and there. But you got to have him in the lineup at least 6 to 7 days a week at a minimum. And speaking of catching, his caught stealing above average is already rated great. The rest still could come up, but he has bench coach and catching whisperer Walker McKibben to help him there. So that's why I'm very excited about Edgar Quero, and so should you. And the reason I get excited about Quero is even when baseball will come for him, and baseball will try to come for him. I've talked about this on many episodes with other players like Sean Burke, pitching wise. And we saw with Brian Ramos, we got all excited about him. And then after 7 games, baseball came for him. But here's the difference. We're now through 16 games, and Quero is still hitting where Ramos was just, he was just done. He got figured out. He obviously came back and showed a little bit of promise, and I'm still not giving up on him. But Edgar Quero is showing what I love, and that is, and he's already cleared, I think, the bar of he takes what the pitcher and the defense gives him. That's what I love about him so much. He takes what is given to him. Now, obviously, the next bar for him to clear is he's got to start driving the ball more. I would like to see him, show off a little bit of that power profile and get some balls over the fence. But I just love his approach right now. And that is he clearly understands what is being thrown to him and then what he should do with the ball. And that is just flick hits to the gap, because that's what he's been doing. He's been doing a great job of that. Has 3 doubles, so you're starting to see that, he can drive the ball. But at a minimum, he's at least clearing the bar of good approaches a good approach at the plate, understanding, okay, this is all I'm going to get to hit. I'm going to put it right where you ain't. And in big time situations too. And that's why I feel confident he will continue to be a dude, because like Shane Smith on the mound and his stuff, like I keep citing, Quero has the stuff at the plate. Sometimes the eye test, you just look at it and you're like, yep, that's the guy. That stuff is good. And you can technically have stuff at the plate by, being well, doing well and knowing, okay, here's what I got. Here's what I'm going to do with it. And I call it situational hitting. And I would love, and you guys have heard me say this before, I love for every hitter to have 2 swings. The do damage swing, launch the ball, type swing. And if there's 2 strikes, I need to keep this line moving swing. And I need to get on base, whether it's a single or fighting off pitches and getting that pitcher to throw me a couple more balls and getting on base. Situation of baseball. And Quero has that. He's got a 340 average and an 851 OPS through 16 games. He is hitting 333 with runners in scoring position, clearing bars. And if you're looking for a sign of better days to come, the Sox have won 5 games with him in the lineup. And they've won the past 3 games when he's been in the batting order. And add in Chase Meidroth's positive impact since coming off the IL, and you got to like where things are going. And speaking of where things are going, the White Sox thankfully had enough of reliever Penn Murfee and demoted him. They realized Bobby Dalbec was not going to rediscover his power stroke and DFA'd him. But Jacob Amaya survives the latest roster shakeup, and let's discuss that next on Locked On White Sox. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. And managing your money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms. So make sure to follow on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. So the Penn Murfee and Bobby Dalbec experiments are over. And yet, Jacob Amaya gets to continue to call himself a big leaguer. And the interesting thing is, if it came down to Dalbec and Amaya, and if I'm Bobby Dalbec, I'm a little mad because at least Dalbec was not an automatic out with his production over 7 games. Things got, and think about this, things got so bad at the plate for Jacob Amaya, who was getting regular, at bats at shortstop. The Sox even put Dalbec there. And I think Dalbec did come up as a shortstop, and the Red Sox even realized in 2021, after I think giving him like 21 innings, they're like, nope, this ain't happening. This is not an idea. It was almost like this is a choice. This is desperation. But yet Amaya stays because there's this belief he plays good defense. And the interesting thing is the eye test says he does. I've seen it with my eyes. But the 2 numbers that best rated defender, not so much. And shout out to Sean Anderson for pointing that out to me. But at least Murphy is done. And for now, the White Sox scouts get another draft win as Caleb Freeman, he's coming up to take his place after the Sox made a flurry of roster moves before yesterday's game. For those watching on YouTube, I do have the transaction that the White Sox tweeted out. So prior to today's series finale versus Houston, again, this was yesterday, returned from a rehabilitation assignment from Class AAA, Charlotte, and reinstated from the 10-day injured list, Josh Rojas. So Josh Rojas, he's not a myth. He does exist. He's now on the White Sox roster. He played yesterday. They obviously selected the contract of Caleb Freeman. They recalled Tyler Gilbert as they put Tyler Frazier back on the IL. He's got a left latch strain. Penn Murfee, he was optioned. And then Bobby Dalbec. He was designated for assignment. And I'll get into more of Freeman in a second. But first, obviously, the reaction in Sox social media world was, how the heck did Jacob Amaya survive when his numbers support he's an automatic out? I mean, that was a huge reaction there. And he's got a 0.94, 121, 108 slash line with a minus 43 WRC plus. So that means his bat quality, because that's what WRC plus measures, basically what type of quality hitter you are, is minus 143 points below average. Because average, the assumption of average is 100. So not only is he, not even at 0, which would be a minus 100, he is basically beyond bad. So there's bad, to borrow this from Moneyball, there's bad. There's 50 feet of crap. And then there's Jacob Amaya. He's also a minus 0.6 F4. And the 2 defensive metrics that measure defense the best don't support, let's keep him on the bench. He's a minus 1 defensive run saved, and he's only 1 out above average. So basically he's neutral. Now, I am all for the Sox realizing Bobby Dalbec stopped hitting home runs in 2022. And I'm actually fine with Josh Rojas being the everyday third baseman until the trade deadline. Then hopefully maybe you get, a player to be named later. Maybe you get a scratch-off prospect if he can produce and show some good defense at third. Actually, I have no problem seeing him at third for a little bit, knowing that you can eventually return Vargas there. But what I would actually like to see the everyday outfield be from here on out: Rojas at third, Meidroth at short, Lenin Sosa at second, and Miguel Vargas at first. Because that might be their best defensive lineup infield. And then obviously it would be ideal for Tim Elko or Brandon Drury hitting DH instead of Andrew Vaughn. But even then, just coming off the bench, like if you're looking for an extra fielder, because, Rojas can technically move around, so can Meidroth, I'd rather them call up Drury, although I haven't really heard much of what he's been doing at AAA. But either way, I'd rather them call up Drury or Brian Ramos. I'd rather see that than Amaya continue to get late inning defensive reps. Because, yeah, I've seen the light. All right. I was once technically an Amaya truther. I thought he could do three things well: sack bunt, sack fly, play late inning defense. But then when I kind of joked around with Sean Anderson on X, now the former host of the show and now host of the CHGO White Sox, he pointed that out. Like, look at his defensive metrics. And I do believe defensive runs saved and outs above average, they're the best metrics that can measure defensive performance. That's not worth keeping him on the roster. It's just not. 222, 338, 278 slash line by Dalbec, that was better than Amaya's. Although I like how the organization realized a 278 slug for a supposed power hitter, and I use supposed, or another way to describe it is power hitter in theory over 7 games. Yeah, it's not worth it. It's not worth seeing. Well, maybe if I give him some more at bats. I mean, I'm glad they learned from the Nick Maton experience. They didn't just keep forcing Dalbec down our throats. And I get the logic of kicking the tires on Dalbec, but he stopped hitting for power years ago. And it looks like he's never getting it back. He's just not. So just move on. I mean, if he clears waivers and doesn't elect free agency and he wants to stay in the organization, play at AAA, be some organizational depth, I'm fine with that. But I'm glad that they were like, you know what? Enough. But it would also be nice if they realized with Amaya, enough. And I love what they did with Murphy. I'm fine. I was fine with seeing if he could be, a lockdown reliever, if he can reclaim that like he was with the Mariners before Tommy John surgery, wiped all that out. And as I've said before, nothing wrong with having a short leash then. That's what I wanted to see. And he was given, he's given a month. He was terrible again on Saturday. So no more of seeing Murphy trying to be revived. Good. That's a good thing, folks. Yes, it's bad that he didn't work out, but it's good that they didn't give him this huge long runway. He posted a 7.82 ERA in 15 games, and it became clear he was not going to be the reliever who had a 2.70 ERA and 105 strikeouts in 2 seasons with the Mariners. He just wasn't going to be that guy. So I love the Sox are taking the approach of on to the next guy, and you've got plenty of on to the next guys in your system. You keep touting puffing your chest about how you got all this pitching. Now, I don't know if Caleb Freeman is going to be good, but hey, if you can get a 15th round pick to the big leagues at some point, that's a win. I fully support that. It speaks to also the Sox draft plan and that they should have from here on out. And that is in rounds 6 through 18, basically after picks 150 and beyond, draft pitchers. Unless you got a college bat that, still has a good power grade or still, good bat to ball skills. And that's what they really need to call it now. Instead of hitting for average, bat to ball, contact either way, positive contact, whatever. Because, hitting for average is, average is great. But again, it's more in the slug and the on-base percentage that teams are looking at now. So if you still have that, obviously take those guys. But otherwise, load up on pitching in rounds 6 through 18. Those are great ways to get still potential value to get some guys maybe to the big leagues because you can always use them in the bullpen. And as we've seen, Tommy John surgery can cost you time. We've lost now time with Kai Bush, Mason Adams, and Drew Thorpe. Obviously their careers are not over because Tommy John has become so routine, but you lose time. So keep bringing in that pipeline of talent to cover the time and to keep giving yourself shots to find cheap, especially bullpen pitching, because the last thing I never want to see, because it was one of the many causes of death of the last rebuild, was spending too much money on your bullpen. Well, spending the limited resources on the bullpen. And Freeman, he was drafted in 2019 out of Texas Tech. And credit to him for sticking out as he's 27. He split time between AAA Charlotte and AA Birmingham. He's only given up 2 earned runs this season, and that was with the Barons. So as I've said, you should be impressed with any pitcher who has a low ERA at Charlotte. That is impressive. Once their ERA gets over 4, look to the whip. Are they at least keeping, or even then, look to their walks. Are they at least keeping, putting on extra batters on base? That's the type of stuff that you want to look at because it is a bandbox there. But he's got a career 1.37 whip in the minors, solid for Birmingham last season too with a 3.92 ERA. He had a 1.96 ERA for the Barons in 2023. He did get to AAA in 2023, but he had a high ERA and a high whip too. But so it's nice to see him actually bounce back and they're in that second stint doing really well. Not sure why he had to go to Birmingham after Charlotte. I'm just going to assume that, they've been bringing in a lot of pitchers. So they just needed a spot and they just know that, hey, if you still want to stick around. So I love this use of their system that, especially that they keep raving about. And I'm glad the White Sox didn't go all John Brebbia thinking, well, we still got to showcase Murphy. He's going to turn it around. He's going to turn it around. He's a veteran pitcher. We got to showcase him. If he has a couple of hot weeks, we can flip him. No, it just wasn't going to happen. He got a month, couldn't get the job done. On to the next guy. Well, in terms of the next guys, let's go over how Braden Montgomery's great first week at High A Winston-Salem went, and pitchers Grant Taylor and Hagen Smith having some solid outings at Double A Birmingham on this week's Minor League Monday Report. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time, and with Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. If you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivers incredible results. Posting a job is free and simple, and within a day, with multiple qualified candidates to choose from. Instead of hiring full-time work, Upwork helps you find affordable top-tier freelancers to scale your business efficiently. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com, to connect with top talent and grow your business today. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode and recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox or wherever they get their podcasts, as this show is available on all major podcast platforms. Hope you had a good weekend. Again, mine was relatively low-key. Just did some stuff around the house, ran some errands. My wife still continues to get ravaged by this ear infection, so taking care of her, that type of stuff. Well, Braden Montgomery passed the test at Low A Kannapolis, and then he's been even better at High A Winston-Salem. The Sox fifth-ranked prospect and potential stud in the outfield is off to a .333, .462, .524 slash line through his first 6 games. And since I've been watching some Winston-Salem games, because I do want to see what Braden Montgomery's doing, because again, he's one of the future core pieces that I have come to believe. I've really liked what Jorel Perez, the team's number 19 prospect who came over in the Eric Fetty and Michael Kopech deal, and Sam Antonacci, hopefully I got that right. Yeah, it's Antonacci or Antonucci, last year's 5th-round pick. I really like what I'm seeing. I really do like what I'm seeing. I do, watch Barron's games, obviously. Watch AAA if you still want to see Kyle Teal. Can't really see Braden Montgomery right now. But you want to watch Barron's games, obviously, if you do have the MLB, .TV package. Otherwise, if you're on X, follow Future Sox. They, post a lot of great stuff. But, Hagen Smith, Noah Schultz, which I'll get to, all those guys, and Grant Taylor, they're pitching there. And then obviously Winston-Salem because of Montgomery. But, man, I really like what Perez and Antonacci are doing. Perez is hitting much better over the past 10 games, taking his average from 230 to 253. He has a 611 slug. And he absolutely crushed a home run yesterday. I was like, oh, boy, that's a nice piece of hitting there, young man. And Sam has an 8-game hitting streak, 293 average with a 905 OPS. So, those are the 3 guys that I keep watching when I watch Winston-Salem because I think they might have a shot. At least those 2. Obviously, Braden Montgomery. Definitely you want to watch Braden Montgomery. Also, Hagen Smith was brilliant yesterday for the Barons, and Grant Taylor, he was darn good on Saturday too. Smith goes 6 innings, 6 Ks, 2 walks, 4 hits, and good to see him bounce back. After his previous 2 starts, he struggled with his command, walked 10 batters in his past 2 starts before yesterday. Consistent command is obviously what Smith has to work on, but you got to like that nice bounce back for the team's 3rd-ranked prospect and last year's number 1 pick. Taylor, the team's 7th-ranked prospect, he's only going 3 innings. That's basically what they've limited his work to, and I'm fine with that, as he missed most of last year with that lat injury. And they also did a 4-inning limit with Noah Schultz last year. He only pitched, the team's top prospect. He only pitched on Saturdays 4 innings. So I'm fine with them, kind of maybe having an inning limit with Taylor. And I also wonder if they're just doing 3 innings instead of 4, as, there is this feeling that obviously he could be an elite starter, but he also could be one of the best relievers in baseball with his fastball topping out at 100. I think it was at 102 in spring training. There was, some thought that maybe he could break camp in the bullpen role. But obviously they still want to develop him to his ceiling, and I like that. But hey, there's nothing wrong with, let's not overwork him in case, they do bring him up this season and come out of the bullpen. Because I think he's the only one of those 3 there that I think has a realistic shot to get called up before late August or September, because never underestimate this team trying to draw a crowd and give us a brief glimpse into Smith and Schultz. I could see them potentially getting, a September call up to draw some fans, that type of stuff. Here they are, that type of stuff. But he had a solid outing on Saturday with 2 Ks, no runs, and just 2 hits. His ERA is at 0.63. And for those on Tim Elko watch, he had a home run this past week, although he did go 0 for 7 between Saturday and Sunday. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on the national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And I'll be back tomorrow with Sam Phelan of SouthsideShowdown.com to talk about the White Sox through the first couple of weeks of the season. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion regarding Edgar Quero and Luis Robert Jr. having a major impact on the weekend series win over Houston, Jacob Amaya continuing to survive roster moves, and this week's Minor League Monday report. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at ToddJDub or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at LockedOnWhiteSox@gmail.com. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.